Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. This is part 2 of what was supposed to be a live roundtable discussion with a couple of comic book professionals, and it was unfortunately interrupted by a false flagging. That's right. About a half an hour into our live stream, somebody false flagged our roundtable. They stopped the live stream. Threw everything into chaos. Geeky and Squid King were downstairs trying to figure out what was going on. It was just an absolute mess. And about an hour after the live stream got pulled down, it magically reappeared on YouTube. But here is the letter from YouTube. They said it was flagged for them to review. They said they reviewed it. I don't think they did. I think they probably had bots do it or something. And then I think they reviewed it and posted it back online. But what we did was we finished the conversation by recording the roundtable, the rest of the roundtable for you guys to listen to. There were some questions that people were asking in the chat on the other video that Geeky was trying to field. Like I said, it was absolute chaos, and apologies for that, and a big thanks to Geeky for trying to keep things going. But some of those questions were actually answered in this video. So if you haven't watched the first part yet, I'll put a link to that in the description. Go do that first, then come back and watch this. And I really would like to know who flagged our video. Who knows? Who knows? Hey guys, this is Neon, and there's going to be a bit of a break in this video. We had a funny thing happen when we were doing a live stream. Apparently, we were flagged, and we got taken down for violating YouTube's terms of service with our very, very tame and probably somewhat boring to some people talk about the comic book industry. I don't understand what happened. I don't know what happened. I'm not real happy about it, but we're going to go ahead and do the rest of this pre-recorded, and then we're going to splice it together and give it to you guys as a pre-recorded video. I do apologize for that for those of you who were in the chat when it happened. We tried to get the word out, but we just can't do it. So, all right.
Who would possibly false flag another YouTuber? Who would do that? I just can't imagine who would false flag somebody that they had some beef with, maybe recently. I don't know.
Hey, Aaron, we all have enemies here.
I think it was screen time with his internet gas.
Oh,
yeah, right, right. So I'm trying to
internet gas. Yes,
trying to remember people's questions from the live stream before it got nuked. After 20 minutes, 20 minutes. Never had that happen in the history of Clownfish TV. We've been on the air since 2016. Absolutely insane. But anyway, we had people asking questions about how to break into comics, and I was going to talk about this, and this is actually. And I wonder if it's because, is this controversial? The pencils down comment, because a lot of people, unfortunately, are going to be out of work in the comic book industry because things are changing. Publishers are closing their doors. For now, they say some of them, I think it's going to be a more permanent thing with Diamond not being around. But yeah, there are going to be a lot of people affected by the shakedown in the comic book industry. So where do you guys think, we talked a little bit about crowdfunding. We talked about doing it yourself. Do you think that, when we come out the other side of this, we're going to have as many publishers?
I think it's going to be a little bit of a cleaning house. I think the strong will survive. And I think that Marvel and DC, if they were smart, they would be doing inventory right now, and they would start like deeply thinking about like what's working, what's not working, and just rethink the entire thing from the ground up, because I don't think anything that they were doing was really working. And just personally, I think the future is in direct to consumer. Having somebody that's the face, the IP creator, and then selling it directly to the consumer themselves. So that's where I'm at right now, and I'm taking a lot of. I'm not afraid right now. The industry is burning, but I'm independent of the industry now. And for 35 years, I was so, like my whole livelihood was so wrapped up in it. And I know my friends that are working professionally now, I know that they are pooing their pants right now, but I am not, strangely. I actually feel confident. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else want to chime in on this?
I definitely think that we're going to lose. We're going to lose shops. We're going to lose some publishers. Some of the publishers that are weaker that they can't weather this or have just spent too much money, chasing Hollywood. Places that have like big expensive offices in LA so that they can, bring movie producers in and try and impress them. I don't know how they weather this. Marvel and DC, they're part of big conglomerates, both Disney and Warner Brothers. But neither one of those companies is particularly healthy right now with everything that's going on. So I definitely I don't think they're going to go away, but they're definitely going to change, and we're going to see, I think, a lot slimmer industry come out the other side. The one thing that's maybe nice is that this destruction it's kind of where like good new things could grow if the fertilizer, the collapse is the fertilizer in which good things could grow. So maybe we'll get a return to kind of like mainstream normalcy where the idea is you have to sell books to the broadest possible audience, and they'll stop chasing a niche market that doesn't exist. And
wait a minute, are you talking about capitalism?
I am, believe it or not.
Maybe that's what shut us down.
Yeah, socialism hasn't really worked for the comic book industry, has it? Like chasing people who have no money and aren't interested in spending any money on your product doesn't really seem to help anything, does it?
Agenda-driven comics, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a shakedown. We're kind of seeing, I mean, the one thing that gets me about it is, we're seeing a lot of people now and trying to get into, doing YouTube or crowdfunding or podcasts. I'm getting all kinds of emails now. People are doing podcasts. So like, what is this, like 2008? But they're all, trying to start these new things. And I admire that, but I'm also like, you don't wait until the Titanic is sinking to build a life raft. And I'm also like, like you guys really need to roll this back a couple of years and we're just going to see, I think we're going to see a glut of displaced comic book artists. I really do. And I'm kind of like, I'm not trying to be smarmy, but I'm like, a lot of these people don't have other job skills.
Well, I think they're already getting it because, especially on Facebook Live, you're seeing a lot of these like comic cons. They're like, because these artists were going to these shows and they're now closed, and now they're hosting on Facebook Live these comic cons. So they're doing convention drawings and razzle dazzle, doing their dog and pony live on Facebook. So. I think people are starting to get it. They're starting to go, let's go direct to consumer, whether they're conscious of it or not, whether it's just like I have to pay the bills, but they're doing it. They're still going direct to consumer, which is the model that I've been doing. I think that Peter's starting to do as well. Is that right, Peter? We don't have Peter.
Oh no! Did Peter get canceled?
Sorry about that.
There he is.
You didn't get canceled, did you? Peter got flagged. Peter has been removed.
They took him out.
Flagged Peter as well.
All kinds of stuff happening right now behind the scenes. But yeah, we spent the past, I'd say, 2.5 years maybe, taking a lot of measures to become more self-sufficient and really getting our own system going with selling direct to readers and retailers. And it's benefited us at this point. The current system, as it stood, even before all of this, it wasn't really working for us. We had better direct sales month to month over distribution for the past, I'd say, maybe 14 to 16 months. It's not a system that's as great or as irreplaceable as I think some people think it is. So I think a lot of publishers are going to become more self-sufficient as well. I think they're going to look into their own distribution. I think the retailers that remain are going to have to get used to the fact that it's not going to be the same system. It's not going to be the big giant phone book that no one really wants to look through. It's not going to be this antiquated, obsolete, dangerous system, if anything, relying on one distributor, really.
And also, you have to pay to get in the book. Like what is it, 20% that Diamond takes, and then you have to pay to get in the catalog, and then they sell the catalog. Like I always thought, we've
never paid to get into the catalog.
Well, I mean, if you want an ad, you do. If you
want an
want
ad,
yeah,
that little corner piece that's like this big, yeah.
Yeah, the ads. Oh man, forget it. They're so
Yeah, the ads are
expensive.
expensive. Yeah.
But and that's their answer too. Is well, take out an ad. You want more sales, take out an ad. But the thing is, then you get an increase in sales, sure, but does it leave you profitable over what that ad cost you? And in the end, Diamond wins because they get the ad money and then they get the increased sales on the books.
And then they sell the catalog too. Like the customers can buy the book. Like I always I get so upset. Like it's double dipping, triple dipping, quadruple dipping. Like they're making money every time they turn around.
So it's an imperfect system, and I think now's a great time for everybody to take a look at, well, how can we become a little bit more efficient with how we're running our business, how we're dealing with the retailers involved, what options there are right now. And I think even that whole thing with DC, with testing out multiple distribution options, that kind of spells maybe Diamond is releasing their exclusive agreements. Maybe there's some kind of a clause there that if they are not distributing, the publishers are allowed to do whatever they have to do. I'm not entirely sure what's happening there, but if they are releasing anyone, or at least allowing them to get a foothold on this market, by the time everything kind of comes back around again, I think it's going to be a very different environment. I can't see those publishers just all of a sudden deciding to leave these things that they just built up to go back to a failing or failed system. So it's going to leave the landscape very different. Anyone that's out there that's thinking, it'll just be maybe 10% of the stores gone and maybe a handful of publishers gone, and then everything's business as usual again. Anyone that's out there thinking that is completely wrong.
Yeah, and I don't think we want it either. And the thing is that I never understood this. Like, Time Warner is DC Comics' parent company. They already have a distribution. Like it's Time Magazine. It's Time. Like I never understood why they didn't just use their own distribution. And then do you know this, Peter? Anybody in the panel here? Marvel bought Heroes World, and then they started distributing their own books for a while. Whatever happened with that? Because I thought that was a great move.
No, I know what happened with that. Marvel went bankrupt, and then they had to sell off. Their distribution chain. So
it was Heroes World, right?
Yeah, it was Heroes World. And so what they did is they actually set all this up. Back in the '90s, this failure that we're having now is because of what Marvel did in the '90s. So they bought Heroes World, and then they pulled their distribution from Diamond and from the other distributor that was out at the time, Capital City. And they're okay, so now you have to order through Heroes World to get your Marvel books. So retailers started doing that. And then Diamond moved and they locked up DC in an exclusive, saying, we want to be the exclusive distributor of your books, because Diamond was smart enough to see, the way that the wind was blowing. And so they locked up Diamond. And all the comic book shops, because I was working in a comic book store at the time, fresh out of school, everybody thought, okay, well, Capital City is going to, then, Image will go exclusive with Capital City, and we'll just have 3 distributors that we order 3 distinct, products from. But Capital City did not move fast enough, and Diamond locked up Image. And once they did that, it was over for Capital City. Capital City folded. And then when Marvel went bankrupt and they had to sell off Heroes World and go crawling back to Diamond, we ended up in the situation we are now with a single choke point for a delivery of product.
Yeah, I really liked Capital. They played nicer with the comics community than Diamond did.
Yeah, we preferred Capital, at the stores that I was working, the chain that I was working for at the time.
Whatever happened to that smaller distributor? I think he was at New York, and he distributed a lot of like indie books. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But there were alternatives. They just weren't really that viable.
Yeah, there was Cold Cut too back in the day.
Yeah.
With indies and reorders, which is really what that helped the market tremendously. That's something that Diamond is lacking in reorders, especially. They're pretty decent with handling the pre-orders, especially that's what they're geared towards. But reorders, I think we lost upwards of, oh man, if I really think about it, since we started the newsprint line, I'll say that we've been around for 14 years, but the newsprint line's only since 2017. I think we lost about 15,000 reorders on auto cancel.
When we were doing Darkwing at Joe Books, and people, would reorder the book, they would get copies of IDW's Donald Duck instead. I had more than one retailer tell me that. They're like, every time we try to reorder, like for some reason they send us Donald Duck. And
Donald, Howard, Darkwing, they're all the same.
Yeah, they're just right.
Duck's a duck.
take your duck book. I gotta go on break.
It's got a beak.
Hey, we got a question. Geeky's actually downstairs on the computer trying to take questions from the couple thousand confused people that we have. They had a question. They said, there are those of us on fixed incomes with ideas coming out of our ears, but we can't afford to pay artists until they get something going. What kind of advice would you guys have?
Marry an artist. Then you're working together on the same thing. No, here's the problem that I find for a lot of writers. They're like, well, how do I get an artist to draw my ideas? I want to do all these things, but I need an artist. Well, you're going to have to pay your artist. Your artist is so much more. Their workload is so much more intensive. I could bang a 22-page script out in 8 hours if I really knuckle down and just do it. But take Silvani. I deliver him a Darkwing Duck script. It would take him the entire month to draw that book at the level that he draws. So the investment of time is much more for your artist. So it's going to be really tough for you to get something done. Unless you're willing to, you have some kind of financial agreement with the artist, because it's just so labor intensive for them. So I think that if you're not at the point yet where you can do that, then maybe hold off, or just maybe find somebody who, if you find somebody who really loves your story, maybe they can, they'll take a less of a rate, because they believe in it. But, always, if you can, pay your artist, because that's, Art was saying on the live stream before we got knocked off, the more you can afford to pay, the better artist you're going to be able to get, and the harder that the artist is going to be able to work on it. If you're paying them peanuts, they might still be willing to draw it, but you're not going to get the level of detail and the level of commitment, because they have to make enough money to survive.
And they'll probably take another assignment to offset the money that they're not making on your book, or they won't prioritize your book. The artist will definitely prioritize if there's a lot of money on the table. Most people will. I mean, there's always flakes, and there's always the exception. But primarily, if it's good money, they'll make it a priority and they'll get your book done. Independently speaking, the one of the hard things is to make sure that you have your artist that can finish the whole run. And stay on the book, because that's very hard to keep an artist, unless you're paying them really good money to stay on. Like if it's 3 issues, you're looking at, maybe 3 to 6 months worth of time. So that's half a year that you're asking that artist to spend on that book. So you have to make it worth their while, because it's time and it's money.
Yeah, Matt, you got anything to add to that?
Well, one, write it. I mean, I know a lot of people. I've got this great idea. Write your idea first.
Yeah.
You need something to start convincing people.
Yeah, we've seen that at conventions. Like Geeky and I, we've gone to conventions, and somebody will give us a verbal, one, we're creators ourselves, so I can't help you. But 2, they'll give us their entire spiel, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. Do you have this written down? Or they'll have a story Bible. It's do you have a script, an actual story? I mean, that's great. You just told me the entire backstory of your elven warlord priestess musician, but what's the story?
Yeah, we still get ideas that just come into us too, even though specifically on our site it says don't just send a pitch, don't just send an idea. We want to see a complete submission with art, with letters. 5 to 8 pages is great, but everyone's got a great idea. Ideas don't really mean anything when it comes to selling a physical product. I want to see, what does this look like? Because if you tell me you have this fantastic idea, I'm going to automatically assume that you're not going to get a great, fantastic team on board. I'm assuming that it's going to be a ragtag group of people who just want to kind of make this thing and give it their best, but maybe they don't know what they're doing. So I automatically would assume the worst, because that's the level I have to think at to take as much or as little risk as possible. So it's only a benefit to you if you're a creator. Make sure you're giving it your best, and make sure you're putting something solid out there, and don't rush either to submit to publishers. A lot of people they go, well, how hard is it to make a comic? I read them. We'll just slap one together. I got a fun idea, and then they submit to a publisher and they make a really poor first impression, or then it kind of stays with you, and it kind of stays with them too if they get that rejection or if they don't hear anything back, and it could really take the wind out of their sails. And as publishers, we don't necessarily want to do that, even though you will be rejected far more often than you'll be accepted.
Yeah,
it's just the truth of it. But it doesn't mean stop. It doesn't mean that you'll never get to the level you want to be at. It just means you got to go back and you got to take some time and really learn your craft if you're serious about this, because no publisher wants to sign on a creator that is just going to dabble in this. And I'm just sort of going to do this. I think I could just do comics. And then that's what you submit. You want someone who's serious about it. And in this way, everybody can benefit from it, because it's, as we all know, it's a lot of work to make a comic book. It's time intensive and it's expensive. Why get into that if you're only kind of half into it, if you're half-hearted?
Yeah, my favorite thing at cons and stuff when I talk to people, they go, I got this idea for this series. It's amazing, and they tell you, and it takes them an hour to explain the story. If it takes an hour, it's you don't really know what the story is. And then I just cut the chase and say, how many issues? And they're like, oh my gosh, this could go on for years. And I'm like, dude, you're going to be, if you get a window of opportunity for 3 issues, then you're lucky. If you can make 3 good issues that do decent, as far as sales, then you're ahead of the game. To a sustainable, you're not going to be able to sustain, 3 years of story. Condense the point, get it done in, like beginning, middle, end. 3 issues are a nice kind of, way to look at it. You have your 3 acts, and then just kind of narrow the focus down and try to tell that epic tale that's going to take 5 years to tell. Say it in 3 issues. Because trust me, man, you're not going to get the chance to tell your massive, cosmic tale. You might be lucky if you get 3 issues worth of a window.
Yeah, you've got to show the editor that you've got the chops. First of all, they've got to be able to look at it and say, like, okay, I think that this person can deliver. And then, if you do, and there's nothing wrong with having a big epic tale, but you've got to boil it down. You've got to decide what is the most important, first step that I can take. So if you look at the original Star Wars trilogy, that expanded over 3 films. But the original movie could have just been a done in one, and they expected it to be, because Lucas thought he was going to lose his shirt while he was working on it.
Yeah.
So that story had to have a complete, it had to have a complete arc for the characters, and it had to end in a way that made sense. So, and then it was wildly successful, so we got the chance to do more. And you can do that. You can have your big epic story, but think of what the first chapter is. What's the first thing that's going to be satisfying that you can tell in 3 issues and be out, just in case it's not successful? You're not tied into a big long thing. I made that mistake sort of made that mistake on our second Darkwing run, because we were told, it's going to be a continuing series. We're going to support this. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to tell a lot of little, done in 1 or done in 3 stories, but there's going to be a longer thread that'll run through the whole thing. And then, by the time we get to, 2 years worth of books, we'll have told this big epic tale that you can go back and you can, find all the little pieces. And we didn't get a chance to do that, but we still had a satisfying, each issue was satisfying in its own right. So, you've got to kind of think of it that way. If you got cut off, can you end the story?
Well, okay, so here's what I want to talk, because we're talking about single issue comics, and there does seem to be more of a shift into graphic novels and manga these days, where people, they do have more of an opportunity to tell a longer story. And this is one I definitely wanted to kind of talk to Matt about, since you guys deal primarily in books and graphic novels and manga. How is the Diamond shutdown going to affect publishers like UDON?
Well, at first, it seemed we were a little better off than most people, because we happened to have because we focused mostly on books rather than single issues, we had a 6 weeks gap in our schedule anyway. So we're hoping maybe this only lasts a few weeks. It won't be too bad. But Diamond is our exclusive distributor, so when they actually shut down, we're not selling any books. And at the same time, Amazon shut down. They're no longer, because because they're just swamped with too many people ordering things. They are focusing on essentials, so they shut down their book category, their video game category, and they're not accepting any new shipments either. So,
are you guys thinking about maybe selling direct to consumer at any point?
yeah, we do. We have our own web store where we sell a few things, not mostly like exclusive variant covers and things like that, merchandise. Like even at conventions, we don't sell books; we sell pins and T-shirts.
Yeah,
things. But yeah, we've got. We're definitely rethinking what our we do comics. We've got like a 5-issue series in the can right now. We've got another couple of comic series. We're just deciding what to do with them. It might be that we go direct to consumer and bring a trade paperback to direct market into to bookstores if it warrants it afterwards. But definitely rethinking anything we do floppy comic wise. The next thing we have coming out in that format is we do an annual Street Fighter swimsuit special, which is not a comic, but it's in comic format and it sells to comic stores. It sells better than
really well.
it sells better than the Street Fighter comic issues.
Yeah.
Every year. So that's coming out in July. So we're gonna have to really see how things go to decide how we release that. If we just do it if there are comic shops to release it to, or if it becomes a direct to consumer item, or what.
Yeah, and that seems to be everybody's rethinking this now, and that's one thing I gotta give Pete props for. And it's so weird because we saw people pushing some publishers out of the direct market space, and that might actually, in my opinion, be what saves some of these companies that have thought about direct to consumer publishing. Because again, you look at Diamond's the only bridge, right, for most of these comic shops, and everybody relied on Diamond. And now I'm looking at this like, you guys have had years, decades to think about what happens if Diamond goes down. Now they're all scrambling. Well, what happened? Oh, now we got to come up with a plan. I'm like, you didn't have a plan? How could you not have a plan? This was inevitable at some point that Diamond, the chain was going to be broken. And you guys just, didn't have all of you people working in comics, and none of you had a plan.
All the eggs were in one basket.
Yeah, and the handle broke on the basket.
Yep.
And now we're dealing with this, and it's just crazy to see pros and publishers even scrambling now again, trying to build the life raft after the boat started sinking. And it's really sad too, because I'm like, you guys, like, you thought this was going to go on forever this way, and there's so many people that have been saying that it wasn't.
This is the other part too that's dangerous with any kind of working monopoly, like what Diamond kind of has. It's not just something that affects the consumer. It's not just something that even affects the business and competition. It affects the fact that you grow complacent. When you're a part of that system, you rely fully on that system, and everything that system can do or can't do for you, you're just powerless to it.
Yeah.
So depending on, if Diamond is doing great, if they're proactive in building new accounts, if they've got a great acquisitions team and they're expanding constantly to get comics out there, you're along for the ride, and you're just going to see your sales explode. If Diamond wants to contract the business, if they want to kind of take advantage of smaller businesses and not play the bigger game to really get their business further out there, you're going to, of course, be affected by that. And then in this, if they just kind of shut down, whether it's their choice or not, you're kind of beholden to all of their moves. So it's always good to look towards, if you're going to have any kind of business at any point in time. And this was a frustration that I had for years until I'd say maybe at the same time that we launched the newsprint, we decided, okay, we have to sell these also to readers as well, because there's just not enough comic shops out there. But there's tons of comic readers still out there. People look at the comic market shrinking and they think, well, the audience for comics is shrinking as well. And that's just not true. There's tons of people that would love to get into comics, that love comic books, that want to get the new stuff. So they seek online sales, or they seek social media to learn about the publishers and the creators that are out there.
Yeah, they're seeking it out. And I see that more and more. And just to your point, Pete, I have friends, and he's since retired, Bob Wayne over at DC Comics, and he was in charge of sales and marketing, right? And, he makes 6 figures a year, and, he's making more money than most of us. And I always just thought, like, what do you do? Like, you're paid so much money, and you're in sales at DC Comics. You're the head of sales. What do you do? Like, are you just like what is your job? Like, all you do really is put ads in Diamond, and then let the retailer order from Diamond, and then you get the orders, and then that's it. Like, there's no sales and marketing involved with any of these companies. Like, I just don't know what their job descriptions really are, like what they do. And when you said complacency, that's exactly what it is. Like, those guys are just business as usual. They just, the same pipeline, the same thing every day.
It's very passive.
Same people. They never ever think about growing the market or building beyond, their confines. And it's just collecting a paycheck year in and year out. And it's just complete stagnation. And, when the, Voldemort thing happened recently, it's just the straw that broke the camel's back. It was already going in this direction, but it just collapsed the entire thing because there was no contingency plan. There was nobody. They have these divisions like sales and marketing, but I still don't know what they actually do. I do more sales and marketing. You do, Pete. All of us do more sales and marketing, I guarantee you, than those guys did. Or
we haven't even had a dedicated brand manager since September 2018.
Yeah.
Well,
we still have an interim brand manager.
When I was at Boom, like 10 years ago, the marketing guy, like, basically he would send a press release to CBR and Newsarama and then call it a day. That was his job. It was marketing. It's like, and then he'd spend the rest of the day on Perez Hilton coming out and telling us about celebrity gossip. So,
right, exactly. That's exactly what they do.
And I remember I had, it's like I was new to the company. I'd worked for Tokyo Pop at that point, and at the time Tokyo Pop was huge.
I love that company. I pitched to them once. Yeah.
Yeah, they were making really good money when I was there.
Yeah.
They had a whole floor on this big building on Wilshire, and it was fantastic. And then to go from there to Boom, like, I was the only person. The marketing guy had come from the Apple store. The editor, the managing editor, had just worked in a comic book store. I was like one of the only guys there with publishing experience, and I would get stonewalled all the time. And I remember having the discussion. How are we marketing by just sending a press release to CBR and Newsarama? And they're like, well, those are the sites people read to get their news. And I said, I've been buying comics for, at that point, I'd been buying comics for probably 12 years, like a weekly comic book store customer. And I said, before I worked for this company, I never went to any of those sites. That's, so we're missing a huge portion of the audience that just shows up at the store and like buys stuff.
Right. And all they're really doing is they're selling. This is the mistake. They're not selling to the consumer. That stuff that I'm doing and that Comicsgate's doing, and I know Pete's doing it, is we're taking it right to the consumer. They're selling to the retail stores. Like I've even heard comic professionals say, the readers, the consumers they're not the people that I placate. They're not the people that I work for. I work for the retailer. So this is a dangerous kind of place to be. Like, no, you have to make product for the consumer. You have to make product for those readers. You're not making product for the retailers. That's part of the situation. That's part of the dynamic, but it's not the be all end all. The be all end all is to make a good product that the consumer will want to buy. And if they want to buy it and they like it enough, then the retail store will do well.
Yeah, it's up to the comic book store to introduce the customer to your product. But if the customer doesn't like the product, they're not going to buy it. So now if the comic store is your customer, then you've now screwed them because you've given them something that's unsellable.
Right.
So,
it doesn't matter.
Even if you have that philosophy that, like, that's my customer, not the reader, which I completely disagree with. I think all these people are your customers. It's like, yeah, Diamond's your customer in the sense, but Diamond's customer is the retailer. And if you don't take care of the retailer, Diamond doesn't have a customer. You don't have a customer. If the fans don't enjoy your product, the comic book store doesn't have a customer. Diamond doesn't have a customer. You don't have a customer. It's a whole chain. So whenever I see, some pro is sitting there with, that attitude of like, oh, well, my customer is the editor, it drives me insane because it's like, you unmitigated snob, you have to make a product that people want to buy. And if you treat the people like garbage, they're not going to buy the product. So now you have hurt the shop, you've hurt the distributor, you've hurt your company, your publisher, and you've hurt every single member of your team that is counting on you to make a sellable book so that they can continue to have a living.
Right. Well said.
You, the retailer, you're only stuck with that book because you're trapped in an antiquated contract based on a system that doesn't exist anymore.
You're trapped in a bad marriage.
And how quickly it ended too. I mean, I'm just completely floored. I have to tell you, when I read Steve Geppe's letter, and look, I know Steve Geppe loves comics, obviously, but I read that letter. It felt to me like a goodbye speech. It really did. If you look at it, it just sort of was like, well, I think you guys will be fine. You just need to get more creative, and it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. It's all gonna be fine. It felt like Bilbo giving his speech in Lord of the Rings, and he just puts the ring on and disappears because Geppe's getting up there. Yep. I mean, if his business takes a massive hit, what incentive is there for him to come back to this? They already laid some people off. It's going to get easier and easier to just walk away from it. Like, take my millions and I'm done. I'm out. There's no market for this. I did my time. I did this for 30, 40 years, whatever it's been, and I'm done. I'm out.
Well, we need distribution that is going to start getting into more of the mainstream outlets. We need to get these books in front of children, for goodness sake. I mean, I say it all the time. There are people that have the conceit like, well, comics aren't for kids. Kids don't buy comics anymore. It's 30 to whatever, that buy comics. And I'm like, listen, man, these are Spider-Man. These are books called Batman. These are made for kids. Like, what adult is even going to go, ooh, cool, Batman? But a kid would. A kid would go, wow, Batman's cool. I mean, when I was 5, I thought Batman was the shit. And now, I still can't get enough of the character. I still can't get enough of the stories. And I think that, you have to get all the mainstream comic books. I'm not saying there aren't adult comic books, because there are, and those are fine. But as the main industry, like superhero comics, Marvel, DC, they need to start making books for kids, and they need to get them in front of, children so that they can grow a market. So like most of us have most of us got our comics from a 7-Eleven or some kind of mainstream kind of venue. We didn't get comics first and foremost from a comic book shop. And I do believe that we need to start, as an industry, we need to get them in front of children and young people, because comic books really they were always designed for a younger person's intellect, for a younger person, to read. You have your little nursery rhyme books, and then you graduate to comics, and then you start reading, Jules Verne and Edgar Rice Burroughs, and that kind of action adventure, and then you go on to deeper, subject matter and more adult stuff. So it's always been kind of like, you see need, fill a need. So the need was always like, what about this market? What about this age group? Who do we how do we market to them? And comic books were ideal for that, man. That's from I don't know, 7, 8 to 15. That's the age group. And I've been doing this long enough that it was always like 5 years. You have a fan for 5 years, and then they age out. So they come in, they become of age, they read comics for 5 years, they age out, and then they move on. And that's why, it wasn't out of the norm to tell similar stories, but now people have been in reading for 30 years. They've been reading, for all their adult life. And they're like, well, I've already read that story. I've been there, done that, that type of thing. And that's harder to, and that's where the market is right now. So they're trying to write and they're trying to create content for that age group, but they're missing out on that younger age group. You know what I mean? Like, they're just kind of placating a certain group of people that are eventually, they're not going to age out. Sadly, they're going to die. You know what I mean? They're just going to get so old that they don't buy the books anymore.
Geeky, she's made the observation before that we have a lot of people writing comics for kids that are basically writing comics for adults with childlike minds. There's so many of these like kids graphic novels and stuff. And there's some really good ones out there, but we either have, a lot of the books being written by, people that don't have kids, or they don't quite understand how kids think, because you pick the book up and you're like, what kid is actually going to read this?
Yeah. And comics that are created for kids, don't do that, because no kid wants to read something they want that taboo stuff, so like when Stan and Jack and early Marvel, when they were creating those books, they weren't talking down to people,
right?
They were very matter of fact. So it doesn't need to be like more adult. It just needs to be well done. You can still have adult situations. And when DC launched New 52, man, I'm going to say it now because I don't work for them. I was really upset because they were like, "Oh, well, we're gonna make comics for that older group of people." And what they were doing is they were like Paul Verhoeven. It was like for 15-year-olds. It was just gratuitous in blood and sexual situations and stuff, but more like Paul Verhoeven sensibilities, like a 15-year-old, like you're making this stuff for a 15-year-old. But that's not really adult. That's just gratuitous, What was the Iron Man story, the Bob Layton, Demon in a Bottle? I mean, some of these stories where kids were still reading those. They were adult, but they didn't, they weren't gratuitous. They were just like, that was an adult subject matter, and they wrote it and they put it out there very matter of fact. And I think, that we don't have to talk down to kids, but at the same time, I think that what the industry thinks is more adult, or what the New 52 thought was more adult, was really just gratuitous comics.
Yeah. I don't know. I think, again, it's catering that audience that's kind of, aging up, because now instead of creating comics for 12-year-olds, you're creating comics for 32 and 42-year-olds, So here, I want to bring this up, just to kind of switch it back to the distribution. Newsarama, they put this out today. DC is going to have apparently returnability, which is good. People have been wondering, what is Marvel and DC doing? Not really a whole lot, and they're doing this, but they're talking about this multi-distributor model. What does that mean? That doesn't even. It's multi. DC is exploring.
It's a regional thing.
Yeah,
regions will distribute to almost like using because when we had newsstand distribution, we had orders come in that we were supposed to send out to various smaller distributors across the country. It wasn't an aggregate the way Diamond is an aggregate. So we had to do, I think, maybe 10 or 12 separate shipments. And it could be a system that's like that. But at the same time, I mean, are those distributors even open? Are those people still coming in? The situation, again, it's very different. So I'm not entirely sure. It's one of those things that, okay, if everything was normal everywhere else, if this was only a problem that was affecting the comic industry, if everything else in the world was just the way it's always been, everything's fine, everything's working, people are out and about, I'm excited then to see this. But with that being a humongous obstacle, I don't know. I don't know what kind of plan they have in place here that would really, especially with them looking obviously to the late June. If this is still going on in late June, say goodbye to 50% of the comic shops and probably 20% to 30% of the publishers, if not more. So I really don't know what's going on. And even creators are going to have to take on more work, different work. Will they be available to just hop on board and get going with whatever DC throws at them?
Well, it would be multiple distributors, but it would also be like that they're distributing into different venues too. Like it's not just, we have more, distributors, but they're still distributing to, the direct market retail stores. We need, people that have connections in Walmarts and Targets and, supermarkets and stuff like that. We need to start getting books in those places. And that's why I always thought it was weird that DC Warner, Time Warner, they already have that built in. Like they already stock magazine shelves right at the checkout counter at most supermarkets. So they already have that built in. They don't even have to build it. I never understood why they were dealing with Diamond to begin with.
Yeah, and they easily could have put out maybe 2, 3, 5 titles that they thought were core and really popular. Whatever the ongoing Superman or Batman, Wonder Woman, whatever maybe is the flavor of the month because a movie is coming out soon. They could have done stuff like that. That's what they're going to have to look at, because obviously you can't put 30, 40 comics in a
they're going to have to distill it down. They're going to have to distill it down. And like Archie does really well, those digest size, and even Disney has the little digest size that are right there at the checkout. Make the product smaller, have them right there and keep the pricing down so it can be an impulse buy.
We were trying to do that at Joe Books. We were trying to, it was tough because, my editor, Jesse Post, and then myself, and at the time, Adam Fortier was there overseeing their line. We were trying to do Disney Adventures again. And even like you could actually go through the Darkwing books that I did, and they were written in such a way so that there were certain subplot pages that you could pull out so that you could condense the story down to 8 to 12 pages. And have a complete story. So we were looking at doing that, and unfortunately, Joe Books just didn't have the capital to really make that a reality. But that was like part of the plan, was like, how do we get these books in the hands of kids? How do we get kids reading this?
Yes.
And then so that we can direct them to shops to as they get older, and because that's just like you are going to 7-Eleven. That's how I got into comics. I saw an ad for the G.I. It's like I'd had some Star Wars comics and things like that, and and just some comic books that my grandmother had given me, where I'd read like a one-off, but never really got into the habit of collecting until I saw that G.I. Joe comic book commercial on TV, and I was already into G.I. Joe, and I was like, there's a comic book, I gotta go see this. And I went and I found I can't remember what the very first issue that I got was, but I was hooked, and I just kept going back to 7-Eleven and getting it every month. And then I'd see an ad for X-Men, and I'd be like, what's the I think it was like the X-Men cover. I want to say it's like 207, where Wolverine's like dragging his claws down the cover, and that ad was in all the books, and I was like, well, what's this? And then I saw it at 7-Eleven, bought that too. And then eventually my uncle was like, well, there's a comic book store. It was like a coin, like a collectible coin / comic book store. That I first discovered, and went and was like, wait, I can like sign up for these, and you'll just set them aside for me, and I can come in. And I remember I got a little bit out of control. We went down there one day, and hadn't been there in about 2 weeks. And we walked in. My stepdad's like, oh, I want to pick up his books, and they're like, okay, here you go. And it was like $150 price tag. Like I had just like ordered a ton of stuff, and
so it was like 20 books.
Now back then, that was, you could, now, that'd be 20 books. But, back then that was a good probably 160 different books. I was just grabbing everything.
And you know what, Aaron, that's not even the exception to the story. That's most people's story. But I don't know what current kids, what their story is, or if they're, I bet most kids don't even know what a comic book is. That's also pretty scary. That just as far as product advertised, just a comic book, not Marvel, DC, whoever, but just as an actual book itself. I don't know how many kids even know that those exist.
How many times have you had this conversation, Art, where someone will ask you what you do, and you say, oh, I make comic books, and then they'll either say like, oh, like like the Family Circus, like in the comic strips, and you're like, no, like actual comic books, and then they're like, they still make those those are a thing.
Yeah,
and they don't know. The general public doesn't know because they're not out there for them to see.
Yeah, exactly.
My first comic book, I still remember. It was G.I. Joe. It was actually the issue that had Destro on the cover.
Issue 14.
14, yeah, had Destro, and oh my god, I read that one, and the cover was worn off. I taped it. I loved it because Destro was one of my first G.I. Joe figures, and I was like, oh my god, there's a whole issue about Destro, and it really wasn't all about Destro. Actually, Destro wasn't in it very much, if I remember. He was just on the cover, but I thought it was cool. But that's how you reach.
They introed him, and then they had that big. I remember when I got to issue, I think it was like issue 16, Night Attack, where
yeah.
you know, Hawk gets shot in the back, and
Yeah.
you know, just all these crazy things happen. Cobra Commander's trying to have Destro assassinated, you know, by Major Blood, and if I wasn't already hooked at that issue, like I remember being so hyped for that. That thing fell apart by the time I was done reading it.
Yeah, most of my comic collection, my personal collection, I just love the books to death, right? Like they're in horrible shape. You loan them to your friend loans them to you, you know. They were just disposable reading, and they were a good time. There wasn't when I was buying comics and getting comics as a kid, I never really thought about them as investments or whatever. I just really enjoyed the stories, and I read them. I just loved them to death, you know, until the covers fell off.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it should be, right? I know my daughter, I mean, she reads a lot of manga, and she's got some of her books are pretty dog-eared. She's read them multiple times. And like our kids, I mean, they read, you know, all kinds of graphic novels and stuff. I can't get them into superheroes. I've tried. They're just not into it. They didn't even care. I was working on Disney Comics for years. They didn't even care. I don't even think they ever read anything I worked on. You know, they're just like, I'm sick of looking at the Mickey Mouse crap. I don't care. But hey, I was going to ask you guys here to try to, I guess, bring it back to the topic at hand before we wrap this up. A lot of people were wondering about, you know, this Marvel and DC, because Marvel and DC go under, it's game over effectively, right? At least for the direct market, which it's already game over at this point, so maybe it's just redundant. But the possibility of Marvel and or DC going out, do you guys have any thoughts on that, given the current financial situation these companies are in?
Who do you want to go to first?
Whoever has an answer first.
Okay, I'll go. I think that odds are very good that, you know, Neon, you and I have talked about this numerous times. We've been predicting it for years because we both work for Disney and we know how Disney works.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've been predicting that at some point they're going to say, you know what, the money that we spend paying employees, paying insurance, you know, paying for this office space for Marvel is not worth the money that they're generating. You know, you and I both know Disney will close down a profitable division if they deem it not profitable enough. So I think you and I have been predicting for a long time that they're going to do with Marvel characters what they do with their Disney characters, which is it's going to move to Burbank under Disney Publishing, and they're going to farm it out to some other company. Because why would you pay all these employees when you could just farm it out to some other company that will pay you to create IP for you? I think that is very, very I mean, it was always kind of an inevitability, but I think that now it's going to happen even faster than it was before.
And just to that point, Aaron, I think Marvel was already trying to do that even before the Disney merger, because there was Marvel Knights and there was also Heroes Reborn. And so I think those were experiments that Marvel went to Image Comics creators, and they said, here's the, you know, the keys to all these cool characters, A-list characters, and like Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, not Todd, but was it like I think Silvestri
was Wolf Portacio.
Yeah, and they all did books, and I think that was an experiment. That was an experiment to see if they could give an outside studio and let them run with it. And they were hugely successful. And then after that, you know, they gave Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti the reins, and they did the Marvel Knights thing, which was really, really popular. And I do know that Disney did try to get a superhero line years ago. It was probably around in the 90s, mid-90s. And it was headed up by Lin Wein and Marv Wolfman, because I know I took several meetings at the Disney lot. I love that. I love that studio lot, man. The old animation lot. It's good, man. But any excuse to go there, I dig it. And so we would talk about that. And then what inevitably happened is Disney did the numbers, and they just didn't make any sense because the overhead that they would have had, you know, to put in to a publishing division to create the superhero line didn't make financial sense. So Aaron, I think you and Neon are exactly right. I think that if Disney could find a publisher, but this is why they haven't done it yet. This is what I feel why they haven't done it yet, is because they have thousands of characters, right? for that universe, for that Marvel universe to exist, they have to sell it all off as one entity. They can't just like go, here you can have Daredevil, you can have, you know, Fantastic Four, and so on and so on. And there's just nobody that has that kind of money to do that.
Yeah, and you know, I think that they were experimenting with IDW, with you know, the kids that they're doing
recently.
Yeah, but IDW is in such financial trouble, and they can't. You know, those books, they're moderate successes for IDW. You know, but they're just not able to deliver the numbers. I think that you know that they require to do something like that. So yeah, you know, but you know, it's obviously something that's been on Disney's mind. It's something that they've been looking at, and you know, I think we're going to see them move towards that. Like we've been saying, it's going to be a very different industry on the other side of this thing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really hard for Disney to do what we're talking about, because I don't know anybody who has that kind of money that would basically pay Disney's licensing or Marvel licensing to use their characters just for publication, just for printing, and not kind of have some kind of ownership or rights to do merchandising or licensing, because that's really what they use it for. Disney uses Marvel for licensing and you know, like they make way more money in the products than they do with the comics. And Disney, or I mean DC, I'm sorry, and Warner Brothers are the same thing. When I got hired at DC, they used to always say it doesn't matter really what we do, because Warner Brothers just uses us as a tax write-off anyway. So they just used it as an IP farm just to create characters and story, and then they just wrote it off on their taxes as a loss, you know, every year. So,
well, you know who might be able to afford to do it? The only guys I can think of would be Viz. Because they've got the backing of I mean, they're owned by Japanese manga publishers, and if they could.
Well, what about Scholastic too?
Yeah, but they would really trim it down. Scholastic is not up for publishing a giant universe of comic books.
Oh no, yeah, and whatever happens, it's going to be trimmed down. I think the universe kind of ends. I can't see anyone wanting to continue the whole universe as it is. Even if the publishers themselves continue, I think it's going to turn into the core titles with guest spots, which is honestly what it should have been the whole time.
Right. I agree.
10, 12 books a month.
Yeah.
10 or 12
tops.
Yeah, maybe. Good, solid books. You know, you don't have to reboot it. You want to bring in some, you know, D-list characters. You bring them in as a cameo in a Spider-Man or an X-Men book or something, you know?
Yep.
And that way you can do more in a more realistic way. You can distribute to other venues versus you know, comic book shops, because comic book shops, they understand the product, and usually the people that go into comic book shops understand the product. But if you're trying to sell to a mainstream audience, just a normie off the street, I think that you have to start writing and tailoring the product more to those people. And that's going to require more one and dones. When DC launched New 52 and they said one and dones, I was like, yes, finally. I mean, there can be multiple storylines or like dangling plot lines and things like that they used to do. But I think more one and dones are going to capture new audience, because the other way, it almost feels like blackmail, right? It's like, I mean, cliffhangers are like how we make, you know, that's comic books, but you still want to have your story. Like, you put down your money, you want that complete story with some kind of dangling plot line that's going to lead you into the next story. Or like good storytellers of old would have like plot lines, multiple like subplots that then would pay off 6 issues later. You know what I mean? Like, they'd be planting the seed over issue. So those things still exist, but the story were more self-contained one and dones with these other plot lines. Now they just don't write those books that way. So if you were coming in, you know, and buying one just for the first time, like a Batman or Superman, I think you would just be inundated. Like, you wouldn't know what's going on, you know?
Yeah, if anything, too, I think that's why the animated series of a lot of these kinds of characters were so great and so impactful. Looking at even Batman, the animated series, You could just jump into any episode pretty much at any point in time and enjoy it. And because you enjoyed it, that's what made you want to continue to watch the next one.
Yeah.
It didn't have to just be this decompressed style of storytelling where every single thing was a 4 or 5 episode arc.
Right.
Or even if you look at Batman 66, and then it's just kind of a two-parter every time, and you have a cliffhanger, and then you come in the next time and you introduce, a little bit of what's to come in the next issue. Or there's so many different ways to do it. You could even have a storytelling style where, like in Batman Begins, where at the end of that, you see the Joker's calling card, and now you hint at the fact of what's to come. So there's all these kinds of things that can happen in terms of how to tell these stories, and you can actually tell a conclusive, actual, wow, I really enjoyed that one. And because I enjoyed it, I'm looking forward to the next one.
Right.
Instead of this kind of, like you said, it's this weird kind of blackmail feel of, well, you didn't really get the whole story. If you want the whole story, you got to read these other 4 issues. And then also it's in these other 3 series as well that you got to pick up.
Yeah, and then they market it like that, like, oh, this is going to be this huge thing. Well, maybe I just want a cool story. Maybe
Right? It's exhausting.
And then, it's exhausting. And then I thought about this. Remember annuals, you guys? Oh my gosh, annuals were the best because they could get Art Adams or they could get some of these A-list guys and give them, because it takes them longer to do the books, 6 months to do the annual. Well, I would even do stuff like this. I would do, your one and dones. And then if you want like big epic stuff, then do, like, I always thought the Justice League doesn't make sense as a monthly. The Avengers doesn't make sense as a monthly. It makes sense as like an event. Like, why are all the characters getting together? They just hang out every month? No, they get together because of some epic storyline. So then every year, do your epic storyline. That's what you do. And then all the kids are going to like, oh, I can't wait to see what they're going to do this year, because it used to be like Justice League would do Justice Society, Justice League crossover, like at the end of the year. So there were always like this epic, like these two worlds coming together to fight some ultimate evil. And they were events of their time, but they weren't like cash grabby. You know what I mean? They felt more organic and they felt more natural.
I'm glad that you guys were, Peter, I think it was you who brought up like the Batman animated series. And one of the things I'm glad to see DC doing is they announced that new series that Paul Dini and Ty Templeton are doing to capitalize on that universe. And this is something that drives me nuts about the corporate comic thinking is, it took DC so long to arrive at that, that conclusion to do that book. And I pitched, if you go to my Twitter account, you can see like 5 pages of a Justice League Unlimited continuation that I pitched. And, the idea was, well, thousands of people read comics, but millions of people have seen this show. So if you can get the word out and you can, put this book out, you have the potential to reach a larger audience that is currently coming in and reading the main continuity. I love that they're doing that with Paul Dini. I think they need to expand that. They need to reach out more to the people who, see see the properties in other forms and then can come in and get their monthly fix when those shows are on hiatus. The fact that they're doing a Young Justice book right now with Brian Michael Bendis that's in regular continuity, and they're not doing a Young Justice that's based on a show that was resurrected because the fans were so passionate about it, that they don't have Greg Weisman and, they don't have him on that book right now. And that's their Young Justice book, but they'd rather sell 8,000 copies of Brian Michael Bendis's version. It boggles my mind. You need to reach a larger audience. Stop trying to appeal to the same people who are aging out of this hobby or that you're chasing out of this hobby because you cannot bother to be nice to them.
Yeah.
You know what, though, too? I also I don't want to give them any more free advice.
That if you're good at something, never do it for free.
because I'm honestly, I'm at the point in my career doing this for 14 years, going through what I've been through. This is the mess you made in your industry. You've clearly made it abundantly known to many people that this is your industry, those creators, that is their mess, and clean up your mess. We have our own businesses, our own things to worry about. And that's how I feel about a lot of this at this point, because they're not going to listen to anyone. This isn't just, us on here being, yelling at clouds. this is thousands, maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of people speaking, or sometimes, which is even worse, not speaking and just walking away.
Right.
And this has happened for a long time, and they just don't care. So I don't see them caring anytime soon, even after this.
Yeah, you're totally correct. These conversations that we're having right now, they've been happening over my entire career. You know what I mean? Like everybody has suggestions on what we can do and how we can do it better. And they just fall on deaf ears.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think the final question for tonight, guys, we're going to bring it back to the topic here. And there are lots and lots and lots of conversations to be had and, for sure going forward. But where I'm going to go right down the list, starting with Peter, then Matt, then Art, then Aaron. Where do you see the comic book industry in 6 months?
In 6 months, I really think this is at least going to last. I think this is at least going to last towards mid-June with what we're currently seeing in terms of a shutdown, a lockdown. I'm not that hopeful about the whole thing. I think this is a 3-month ordeal we're going to be looking at. And with that in mind, I think we all have to kind of brace ourselves for it and do what we have to do to survive and to pay the bills. This is beyond comics at this point. This is not just how do we help retailers. This is not just how do we get books out there. This is how do we put food on the table? How do we keep roofs over our heads? So I think a lot of people are going to be looking towards crowdfunding. I think a lot of people are going to be looking towards setting up websites, building their platforms, building their brand, securing themselves in a much better position to not have to rely on corporate gigs, especially, or even something as quaint as sending the books to a distributor and they give them to someone else, and then you continue to make your stuff. I think people are going to have to become very used to doing many different things and wearing many different hats. And I know many people in this chat right now, we're used to that, but there's a lot of creators, the overwhelming majority, I think, that they're not used to that. So I hope retailers can survive by selling through their back stock of items. If anything, I see people all the time worried that they're not going to get anything new. What are they going to sell? And I'm thinking, this has been the problem the whole time, is they have too much product and they're not moving it. They have more than enough items to sell. So as long as they can get stuff out there, they can move it, online sales, things like that. They have their own communities, their own people that come and shop, their own customer base, and they can and certainly will reach out to them. But some shops will also look at it and go, you know what, let's quit while we're ahead. And they'll just close up. And that's unfortunate. But I think right now we're looking at a time where it's really good to reassess what you've been doing, figure out how you can restructure and move forward and trim the fat.
All right, Matt, what do you think?
In 6 months, publisher-wise, you're going to see some publishers kind of limp through this event and try to do business as usual on the other side and probably not get anywhere. And you're also going to see a lot of people try a lot of different things, and nobody's really got the full picture of how things should operate. But I think you're going to see a lot of different formats and a lot of different people trying to use different distribution methods, trying to go direct to consumer. Pretty much everybody's going to try everything, and hopefully something's going to work.
All right, Art, what do you think?
I'm just going to back up for a minute. This is the saddest conversation I've had in a long time. I never thought we would be talking, like this. This hurts me to my core. My whole life is wrapped around all of this stuff. It's been since I was 5 years old, since I got my first Batman comic. Man, I'm getting choked up just thinking about the ramifications, the real ramifications of what we're talking about. This is not casual. When I say these things, this is not like glib or trying to get like clickbait or anything like that. This is real. And when I hear some of my brethren that were producing comics say, like, I just wanted to go back to normal and all those things, it's like, that's why I left the mainstream, a year and a half, 2 years ago, because I didn't like the normal. I thought the normal wasn't working then. When I looked at potential where, people are working their asses off, hours and hours. You guys have no idea. Some of these pages, 10 to 12 hours, just to ink a page, let alone pencil it. The work that goes into this and time, it's insane. And the amount of money, Sean Gordon Murphy, God bless him for talking about how little comic book artists are making, and how many of them are working under the poverty line, to make these comic books. This industry was not working, people. It wasn't working then. So I'm trying to look at it. In a positive light. And what I'm taking from it is that, now that it's almost hit rock bottom, I hope that people in power, people that are in these leadership roles, are not thinking, "Oh, I just want to go back to business as usual." And I'm hoping that they're looking at this as like, we have to make some changes. We have to completely overhaul this system if we're going to move forward from here. But in the meantime, I'm not waiting for that. I'm not waiting for somebody else. I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of putting my future in somebody else's hands.
Amen.
So I've been crowdfunding for I've been on and off throughout my career, but full time I've been doing it for 2 years. So right now on Indiegogo, my Vampirilla black and white variant cover is trending, and it has been for 4 days on Indiegogo. So thanks to all the backers. Chrono Mechanics is at $37,000. $37,000 for a fairly unknown comic book. And it's just word of mouth. It's just getting the word out there and taking it to the people. And where Peter was saying, take it to the people, the consumer. For me, anyway, that's how I'm going to put food on my family's table and keep a roof over our head. Is I am going to go direct to the consumer. Comicsgate has created a really good template. Since this whole thing crashed, you have no idea how many people have contacted me, comic professionals, big names, and saying, "How do you do it? How does this work?" They're looking into options and different opportunities because they're losing faith in the big two and in the comic paradigm that had existed for all these years. So thank you so much for letting me say this stuff, Neon. I do appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. No problem. I mean, that's why, it breaks my heart. I always wanted to work in comics. I had a chance to for a number of years. Didn't go all in though, because I couldn't afford to. It was just, it doesn't pay, and I always worked a day job and did comics on the side. And, I know I was resentful for a number of years kind of about it, because I'm kind of like, man, I wish it paid better so I could do it full time. But now, looking at the industry, I'm like, well, thank God I did have other skills. I could jump into some other stuff. And, look, my heart does break for people that are going to be displaced from work. I mean, there are some pretty awful people working in comics, but there are also some pretty awesome people working in comics. And unfortunately, this thing is going to affect everybody. It's going to affect everybody. So, it's just really unfortunate. It really is. And I don't know if we have Aaron. Do we have you, Aaron? Are you in?
Yeah, I had technical difficulties, but I came back.
Oh, okay. Do you want to? Where do you think things are going to be in 6 months?
I think Peter summed it up, pretty succinctly. I don't know that I really have anything to add to his analysis. But what I will say is, I do see a lot of people kind of like celebrating the demise of jobs for a lot of the creators that they feel have treated them poorly. Yeah. And I absolutely understand that. I understand the Schadenfreude. I understand the pleasure that people take in seeing karma befall these people. But the thing that you've got to remember is that the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. And there's so many good people in comics. There's so many people that keep their heads down, that do their work, that love this medium so much and have contributed so much to it, and who actually care about you, the customer, that are going to be affected by this as well. So it's the best advice that I can offer is just try to be compassionate. You don't have to feel bad for the people who've mistreated you, but the people who are out there trying to do good things and trying to produce the very best books that they can, those are the people that are going to need your support going forward. And hopefully, all of the fans out there, you guys will be financially stable. We'll get through this. It's going to be rough, but hopefully we'll all get through it, and we'll all be able to afford to put a little bit of money towards supporting guys like Peter at Alterna and guys like Art and some of the crowdfunders as well as maybe some of the guys that are at the companies that are treating customers well and are doing good work. So that's my hope for everybody.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Hopefully we'll get to the bottom of what's going on there. But I really appreciate the chat. We're going to put this up as a pre-rendered or a rendered video probably tomorrow at this point. But definitely we will let you know when it goes live. And we certainly do appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, guys. We're going to sign off. Thanks for watching Clownfish TV. We'll talk to you guys later. Goodbye.